there's going to come a time where you get to pick what you want to pick to do.
Yeah.
And you can unleash that brain, right?
Yeah.
And match it up to something amazing for you. In the meantime, the environment is not going to radically change. So let's work on strategies to help you get everything you can so that when you do have the opportunity to do what you want to do, you've got plenty of choices.
You're listening to Be Well by Kelly LeVeque. Dr. Steven Storage is a board-certified psychiatrist specializing in both adult and child adolescent psychiatry. Raised in Southern California, he earned his undergraduate degree, magna cum laude, in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley, his medical degree from UCLA, where he served as class president, and he completed his psychiatry residency at Stanford, and a child adolescent psychiatry fellowship at USC, where he was chief fellow and now serves as adjunct clinical professor. Dr. Storage has worked in both academic and clinical settings, including Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and has received multiple teaching awards from USC Keck School of Medicine. He's published in peer-reviewed journals and has presented on topics such as neuroimaging, the effects of social media on mental health, psychosomatic medicine. Currently at Amen Clinics, his integrative approach combines imaging, psychotherapy, nutrition, lifestyle, and pharmacology to help patients of all ages achieve their fullest potential. It is such a pleasure, and I've been so looking forward to welcoming Steven Storage to the show. Dr. Steven Storage, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I found you through Dr. Amen and then went down a rabbit hole on your Instagram and all of the educational videos and reels that you have. And then I looked into your pedigree, UCLA, USC, Stanford, Berkeley. I mean, all of California and all of the best institutions. You have an amazing background, but I think what I loved most about you was your positive outlook and the way that you share is with hope and vision for parents to really take action, and that our brain is ever changing and we have control. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be in my old stomping grounds.
Yeah, welcome back. So can we talk a little bit about your path? Obviously, I named some pretty amazing universities, but your traditional path and how you curved more, kind of like took that winding road toward a functional approach.
Absolutely. So actually, I entered med school not even knowing that I would be a psychiatrist. I thought I would do emergency medicine or surgery or something like that until I had my psychiatry rotation. And then the opportunity to connect with people on that deeper level and not just look at lab values, but really get to know a person is what really drew me to psychiatry. But then practicing psychiatry felt a little bit different than that, because the traditional model of psychiatry is helpful enough that it survives as an institution, but not helpful enough to feel great about it. And so the way diagnoses are made now is symptom clusters, right? You have a certain number of symptoms, you meet criteria for a diagnosis, and then most of the time that's going to be met with a prescription. And that prescription may or may not be super well thought out. Appointments are quick. And so that frustrated me. That's not really why I went into psychiatry. I didn't want to be just a pharmacologist. I wanted, again, to understand where this stuff was coming from and not just treat a symptom. And I have always felt mental health is brain health, right? Like ultimately the way we feel, how we think, the emotions that we have, our goals, our ambition, it all tracks back to an organ.
Yeah.
And that is the brain. And we don't think about it because we don't look at it. It's not visible. We spend more time thinking about things like skin and muscle than we do about our brain. And yet it drives everything. And so the Amen Clinics model fits that to a T, right? Because we're not just we ask lots and lots of questions.
Yeah.
We do observations, we do computer testing, but on top of that, we also look at the brain. And that's really called to me and translated to results. I mean, outcome measures when you actually look at the organ you're treating, dramatically better than when you're just guessing.
So the traditional model, you sit down, you have a little conversation, you fit this cluster of symptoms, you're given a prescription and you're sent on your way. That obviously didn't make you feel great. When you talk about looking at the organ that you're treating through functional scans, what is a functional scan? What machine are we using? What are we looking for? What parts of the brain are you looking at? Yeah. Give me the 101.
Great question. So the scan type we use is called SPECT. It stands for a bunch of fancy sounding stuff. Single photon emission computed tomography, which no listener needs to remember. The thing that you need to know about a SPECT scan is it's looking at blood flow in the brain. So the images we're looking at are not brain tissue in and of itself. It's not like an MRI or a CT scan. We're looking at blood flow, and blood flow tells you about activity level. Mm-hmm. So we look for areas where the blood flow is either higher than expected, that would be a hyperactive region, or lower than expected, that would be a sleepy region. And depending on the regions involved, it tells you a lot. You don't make a diagnosis just straight off a SPECT scan. You're using that in conjunction with everything else to gain further insight. So examples. Prefrontal cortex, right? The very front of our brain that's responsible for focus and time management and organization and impulse control. In some types of ADHD, and we can talk about all the different types, but in some types, you'll see reduced activity there. Mm-hmm. And those are people who really benefit from things that stimulate dopamine. And they can harness the superpowers of ADHD while also learning to deal with some of the challenges. There's another part of the brain called the anterior cingulate gyrus, and it's located basically where my fingers would intersect, and that's our brain's gear shifter. And when it heats up, our gear shifter gets stuck, and then we get into the obsessing and the thought loops and the worrying and the replaying things in our mind. There's another part of the brain called the thalamus, deep inside the brain. When that heats up, the strength is we can be very intuitive, perceptive, deeply feeling, sensitive, but at the same time, we're more prone to challenges with mood state, like depression. That's 3. There's many, many more that we look at. And what's interesting is even though this technology is cutting edge, we're still scratching the surface. I mean, the brain itself, the most complicated machine known to humankind, more connections in it than stars in the universe. And that number is insane, right? 100 billion stars in our galaxy, and it's one of 100 billion galaxies. More connections in the brain. So even though this is cutting edge, it's still scratching the surface. There's so much more to know about the brain, which is another reason I went into psychiatry. It's just so much to know.
Yeah, and forever student. You can continue to learn and follow the advancements in technology.
Totally.
When you talk about brain flow, it kind of makes me think about meditation, and you were talking about the thalamus. Like, how does someone's state going into a SPECT scan with you impact their results?
It's a really good question. So here's how to think about a SPECT scan. So if you've ever gone to the doctor and checked, a random glucose, mm-hmm. a random glucose would be just a spot in time, right? Yeah. A SPECT scan is more like a hemoglobin A1C. So it's more like a 3-month average of what blood sugar has been. So someone having a bad day or something, it's not really going to influence the scan. We're really capturing how the brain has been firing over a stretch of time. So much so that if anyone ever wants to do a repeat scan to track progress, I usually tell them to wait about 6 months at a minimum, because that's about the amount of time it takes for the brain to remodel.
Wow, that's so interesting. So when you are taking a SPECT scan, is it something that you should worry about radiation, or is there any concerns with getting multiple brain scans across your life?
It's a great question as well. There is radiation associated with the radio tracer that's used. However, the amount of radiation is about the equivalent of a chest X-ray, and there are no long-term data to suggest that there's any kind of harm from it. And Amen Clinics has done now almost 300,000 scans, so it's a pretty big database.
Wow. So in looking at that database, what are some of the biggest takeaways in regards to someone being able to improve a brain scan over time?
That's my favorite part of the job.
Yeah.
Because I've been with Amen Clinics long enough that I've gotten to see people do repeat scans. And, we're not treating a scan, we're treating the person. But it's nice to also see that objective improvement. Yeah. And brains aren't stuck. They're not stuck when we're kids. They're not stuck when we're adults. They're not stuck when we're in a geriatric age. Brains can change. And that's what we tell people, right? You're not necessarily stuck with the brain you have. No 2 brains are the same. Mm-hmm. Every single brain I've ever seen, I've seen thousands now, they're all fingerprints. No 2 are exactly the same. And knowing your fingerprint is really helpful, because then you can really leverage your strengths, because everybody has them, right? We may not be fully aware of them, but everybody has them. and you can smooth out the rough patches, and then ultimately improve the overall health of your brain. I'm really in the business of taking awesome people and making them feel more awesome. Like that's how I see myself.
My new amino acid supplements come in flavorless and lemon water, and they're flying off the shelves, and here's why. I have meticulously sourced these vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. I am so proud of this being made the Be Well way, with maximum quality and minimum ingredients. My flavorless is simply those vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. Our lemon water contains minimal ingredients of only organic lemon powder, organic citric acid, and organic monk fruit. No natural flavors, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no emulsifiers, no additives. This is simply that nutrition targeted for your goals. If you want to give my Be Well protein or aminos a try, or restock it if you're already loving it, take advantage of my gift for podcast listeners. Code podcast10 is going to get you $10 off just for being a listener. Write it down and shop with me after you listen. If you're trying to stay hydrated this summer without the sugar, food dyes, or mystery ingredients found in typical sports drinks, let me introduce you to Element. It's a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix made for people who want to feel their best. Now, whether you're chasing your kids around the park, powering through a workout, or just trying to beat the mid-afternoon slump, electrolyte balance is key. Low levels can show up as headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, and even brain fog. Element delivers a science-backed dose of sodium, potassium, and magnesium with none of the junk. And right now, I am absolutely in love with their limited time lemonade salt flavor. It's tart, salty, and basically summer in a glass. I love that I can enjoy this nostalgic taste of lemonade and feel good about sharing it with my boys on a hot summer day. Element lemonade stands incoming. We made one, we had one, it was the best. Check it out on my Instagram feed. And here's the best part. You can try Element totally risk-free. If you don't love it, they'll refund you. No questions asked. Plus, when you order through my custom link, you're gonna get a free 8-count sample pack of Element's most popular flavors, including 2 stick packs of citrus salt, raspberry salt, watermelon salt, and orange salt with any purchase. So just head to drinkelement.com/Kelly. That's drinkelement.com/KELLY. It's the perfect way to find your favorite and share with a friend. It's so interesting and just like fascinating to me to think that you could understand through a SPECT scan where like my strengths are, where my weaknesses might lie, and ways to improve those. So can we talk about some of the things that you can gather from a SPECT scan and what an example of a strength might be and what an example of a weakness might be?
Well, we talked about that anterior cingulate a second ago, so let's use that as an example.
Okay.
When the anterior cingulate fires really hot, the strength is people can be really persistent and strong-willed. Yeah. And so most like CEOs, doctors, lawyers, I mean, anyone who's had to grind to get to where they are, they almost always have a hot anterior cingulate on their scan. The flip side of that, though, is they can be perfectionistic, ruminative, obsessive, sort of feeling like a rat is running on a wheel in their brain, and so that's what I'll tell people. If I see that finding, I'll say, especially if it's a kid, for example, I'll tell the parents, your kid is wired to be persistent and strong-willed, and that might make you want to pull your hair out now, but down the road, that could be a good thing too. We just have to know how to drive this machine.
Right. So when you are, that would be invaluable information for me as a parent. Like, how do I sign my boys up? How do I sign my whole family up? amenclinics.com. Yeah, no. But
email me or text me.
Yeah. So when you're looking at that and you're seeing like these different parts of the brain that are hot, or would you call them cold?
Yeah, I would say
like cold. Lack of blood flow. Is that what we're talking about?
Reduced blood flow. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about like the frontal lobe, for example. I remember and my audience knows this because if they've listened to the episodes where I talk about being diagnosed with ADD as a kid, I was in 3rd grade. And I remember my mom saying, like, you have lack of blood flow to your frontal lobe, so concentration can be difficult for you. In reality, like, I'm in 3rd grade, Johnny's talking behind me. I'm really like extroverted and social. I'm not paying attention to the teacher at all. I'm easily distracted. But when I'm focused, I'm like, let's go. Yeah. I could be in this book for hours. It feels like 5 minutes. And I've talked about it being my superpower. So what is it about, like, when you're looking at SPECT scans, do you see a hot frontal lobe or a cold? Because that seems circumstantial to me.
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. So, and so much to say about that. So first off, ADD, it's now all called ADHD. It's just a silly terminology thing. What used to be called ADD is now called ADHD inattentive type, which is way less efficient.
How many words can we add to this diagnosis?
Exactly, make it more complicated for people. Yeah, that'll help them understand. But ultimately, what ADHD is, it's not actually a disorder of focus. That's a common misconception. It's really a challenge of modulating focus. So like you just said, people with ADHD, they can hyper-focus better than anyone in the world. They could dive into something for hours and hours and hours if they're interested, if it's motivating, maybe if it's a time crunch, whatever the situation may be. Because in that state, their brain is generating more dopamine than it normally would. And the prefrontal cortex runs primarily on dopamine. So if we have ADHD, and I do myself, by the way, but if we have ADHD and we're doing something boring, low dopamine state, prefrontal cortex doesn't have the fuel that it needs. 2 minutes feels like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And suddenly flip the switch and we can hyper-focus. And for a parent, it can be confusing because you could be looking at your child saying, well, you're able to play video games for 5 hours. Why can't you do your homework for 5 minutes? And it's not that the child is choosing to or being, disobedient or defiant or whatever else. It goes back to neurocircuitry. So I love that you said ADHD superpowers, because I personally, even though it stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I think it's so poorly named because it's really not a disorder in my mind. It's a different way of being wired. And I mean that very honestly. 1 out of 8 kids has ADHD. And if you think about where does ADHD even come from, there's evolutionary theories that would say, when we were more primitive versions of ourselves, the person with ADHD is the one scanning the environment and spots the saber-toothed tiger before it gets everyone.
Yeah.
Or it's the person who is motivated on the hunt and doesn't come back unless they come back with an animal. So that wiring...
Maybe me too.
That wiring is advantageous to us as a species. But then you take that beautiful brain and sit it down at a desk and ask it to listen to a teacher for 8 hours. It's a mismatch between wiring and environment, which is not really a disorder. What I tell kids is there's going to come a time where you get to pick what you want to pick to do.
Yeah.
And you can unleash that brain, right?
Yeah.
And match it up to something amazing for you. In the meantime, the environment is not going to radically change. So let's work on strategies to help you get everything you can so that when you do have the opportunity to do what you want to do, you've got plenty of choices.
Yeah. I will say, I think my dad struggled growing up, and I was a little bit thankful for that, because in the math and science I excelled, and in, reading and history, it was a slog. Like, don't make me do it. And he'd always say, like, did you try your best? Say, yeah, for whatever subject it was. And he'd just go, C's for degrees, baby. And like,
awesome.
That takes the pressure off of a child who, ACTs, SATs, it was like just such a drastic difference in scores. Yeah. Because I was just so much more interested in the numbers and the science than anything else. So it feels like you're preaching to the choir and giving me like that freedom to like teach my kids the same. It's like whatever they are going to excel in later in life, like I want them just to get through the system and go follow their dreams.
It's so important because for a kid who has ADHD, where it, let's say, hasn't been diagnosed, the message that kid receives, by the time they're 12, they've actually gotten like 20,000 pieces of negative feedback compared to a peer without ADHD. And it's things like, why aren't you focusing? Why didn't you understand? You forgot to turn this in. And each one might not be with malintent, but 20,000 adds up. And the person ends up feeling like self-esteem has taken a hit. And then people start feeding themselves things like, well, I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough. And the reality of the situation is ADHD and IQ have nothing to do with each other at all, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, if you take someone with ADHD and sit them down for a 3-hour IQ test that they're not into, they might not score that great. But then if you treat that same person for their ADHD and have them take the same test, they're going to score higher. They're not smarter now. They're just demonstrating it the way it's being measured. Right. So knowing that, I think, is really important, because especially for girls with ADHD who maybe aren't stereotypically running around the classroom, causing big problems, making they don't get called out by the teacher, and then they don't get assessed. And so they internalize a lot of that. And then you see anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues. Yeah. And a lot of times people end up coping with it, sometimes perfectionism, right? Like, I don't want to make more mistakes, so I want to be perfect about everything. Or people pleasing too, like, I don't want people to be disappointed in me, so I'll say yes to stuff, even if it's not in my best interest.
Yeah. I would say, I don't know if it's my birth order. I'm the oldest of 3 girls and like a daddy's girl. So I definitely was like people pleasing first. And maybe that's playing a role in just what I was dealing with in my youth. So that's interesting. No one's ever brought that up to me before. But you mentioned earlier that for some people with ADHD, dopamine is supportive. Are there, obviously you have gender differences. You have boys and girls, and then you also have, it seems like, different types of.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the different types of ADHD?
Absolutely.
and how they might be treated differently? Because I do feel like there is this theme where people say everyone's being diagnosed with ADHD and everyone's getting basically like amphetamines and you shouldn't be giving your kids medication. And how do we know if it's the right choice or the wrong choice? Or how do we get like a comprehensive diagnosis from someone like you?
Another really good question. So there's 3 parts to that. So how do you get a diagnosis? What are the 7 types? And then when do you decide to use a medication? So how to get a diagnosis. I don't like to rely on any one piece of data to make a diagnosis. I like to put multiple pieces together and then feel really good about the conclusion. So I think the best way to get a diagnosis is a comprehensive history, obviously a face-to-face or Zoom if necessary, mental status exam, neuropsych testing, which we do in our clinic.
What's that?
So basically computerized testing, assessing things like reaction time, focus, cognitive flexibility, things like that.
Okay.
And then actually looking at the organ you're treating. So in our case, SPECT scans. And then putting all that together and feeling really, really good about the conclusion. And with ADHD, if you're just going off of symptoms by themselves, the different types, you can't really differentiate all that well just by talking to someone. Right. So classically, ADHD is divided into 3 types. There's the inattentive type that you were diagnosed with. There's the hyperactive impulsive type, and then there's combined type. It's like all of the above. In our work, we've actually described 7 different types of ADD/ADHD. So there's the classic type, hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive only, anxious ADHD. And in that type, what you'll see in a scan is deep inside the brain, there are these regions called the basal ganglia, which are basically our fight or flight centers. And in someone with anxious ADHD, those areas are raging. And it's not necessarily that their prefrontal cortex is having a hard time keeping up. It's that the background noise is so loud that it drowns out the prefrontal cortex's ability to lock in and focus. So if you take that person and put them on a stimulant, how's that going to go? It's like lighter fluid for those basal ganglia. Yeah. They feel more anxious and jittery. Maybe they focus a little better because if anyone took a stimulant, they'd probably focus a little better, but they feel awful, right? And so that's the person who goes and tries Ritalin and then it doesn't work. And then the doctor says, well, let's try Adderall and it doesn't work. And they think, what's going on? It's a different type. So anxious, over-focused ADHD, that's a person with a really active anterior cingulate. So they really have a hard time shifting their attention more so than even just classic ADHD. So again, for that type, you need things that soothe the brain, not necessarily just stimulate it. Then there's limbic ADHD. That's a person who is so depressed that it's impacting their ability to focus. When we're depressed, the brain sends more blood to the thalamus, and there's only so much blood to go around, so the prefrontal cortex sees less. And so for a person like that, supporting the depression side of things is also going to be really important. Temporal lobe ADHD, that's where the temporal lobes on the side, right by the temples, go down in activity. And those you can think of as our emotional bumpers. And so when they go down, this is a person who has a really hard time containing emotion. So they feel things very quickly, very deeply. It's hard to come back to center. And the emotional regulation piece is like key. And then the final one, I think I hit 7, but you can let me know.
Maybe even more. Yeah,
is ring of fire ADHD, which sounds dramatic because it looks dramatic on a scan. Basically, the entire brain looks lit up, like a fireworks show. And these are people who are struggling with several symptoms: inattention, hyperactivity, emotional regulation challenges. And again, for that type of person, a stimulant might not be the way to start.
Feels like a volcano with the ring of fire. Feels like you're going to have an explosion. That doesn't seem right.
Very Johnny Cash, yeah. So how do you decide when to use a medicine? I'm not medicine first. I'm a holistic psychiatrist who also prescribes medicines every day when it's well thought out, when other things have been tried, if it's targeted, lowest effective dose, all of these things. But the things I think about first are some of the basics, right? Like, are there any nutrient deficiencies? We should check some labs, right? What's the lifestyle looking like? 3 pillars to brain health: sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And without those being in place, it's actually impossible to build a healthy brain. Supplementation, are there things that we should be thinking about to help boost functioning of whatever area is involved? Technology-based interventions, things like neurofeedback, sometimes hyperbaric oxygen, sometimes vagus nerve stimulation. It depends on what the person needs. And then when we exhaust all these other things, therapies, then we think about a medicine if the symptoms are affecting the person's developmental trajectory, or it's causing a lot of distress or just anxiety, depression, then that would be a time to think about treating.
As a mom and a clinical nutritionist, I'm always looking for clean, effective ways to support my boy's health. And that's why Hiya has been a favorite in our house. Most kids' vitamins are basically candy, loaded with sugars, dyes, and gummy additives. And that's what I don't want in my pantry. Hiya is totally different. It's a chewable vitamin made with 0 sugar, pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, and packed with 15 essential vitamins and minerals that support immune health, energy, brain function, and more. With your first order, you're going to get a reusable bottle and all these cute stickers so the kids can decorate it. Then each month, they send an eco-friendly refill straight to your door. And if your kids are picky about greens, Hiya now has a chocolate-flavored Daily Greens Plus superfood powder that you just mix with milk or a non-dairy option. And you've got a delicious drink packed with 55 plus whole food ingredients to support brain power, development, and digestion. Now, we've worked out a special deal for my listeners. You're going to get 50% off your first order. So just head to hiyahealth.com/Kelly. That's HIYAHEALTH.com/Kelly, spelled KELLY, to get your kids the full body nourishment they need to thrive. Are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? I used to add regular honey to everything, tea and salad dressings, but once I tried Manukora, I never looked back. This isn't just any honey. Manukora is rich, creamy, and so complex. It feels indulgent, but it's packed with powerful nutrients that support our gut health and immune system. Their honey is ethically produced by master beekeepers in a remote forest of New Zealand, where bees collect nectar from the Manuka tea tree. The nectar is loaded with bioactives, including MGO, a special antibacterial compound that sets honey apart. One of my favorite ways to enjoy it is straight off the spoon. It's indulgent and sweet right after a meal. It kills all of my sugar cravings, and it's the perfect dessert that provides so much more than sugar. So if you're interested in trying it, head to manukora.com/Kelly to save up to 31% plus $25 worth of free gifts with the starter kit, which comes with the MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's manukora.com/Kelly to save 31% plus $25 worth of free gifts. Yeah. So interesting because So I was diagnosed in 3rd grade, but then it was just not C's for degrees. I mean, I did a little bit better than that. But I remember going to USC and having to take a procrastination class based on my diagnosis, never taken medication until then. And they were like, if you would like to get into USC and you have this diagnosis, you have to take this class and you have to be evaluated. And the psychiatrist at the time was like, I think you should take Adderall. I was like, oh, okay. My parents were against it when I was younger. And I lasted like 3 or 4 months. Like I felt crazy. Like like racing heart, too much caffeine. And I probably was having caffeine on top of that as a freshman at USC.
Probably.
Yeah. Most likely. And to think back at like how I almost feel like not that I don't have memories of that time, but I felt really frenetic. And like I could easily ace a test. Like everything I would read, I would absorb, I'd be able to regurgitate. But I felt like my emotional system was off, or like my feeling system, or like the experience I was having, almost like it was numbed or dulled out. And ultimately like got off of it towards the end of freshman year, but just really felt like I wasn't myself. And to this day.
Have you had your brain scanned?
I haven't.
I mean, I feel like you need to.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've kind of always wanted to.
It would answer, not that you're going to do anything differently now, because I think your brain type is well suited to what you do, right?
Yeah.
But just to answer questions from the past, maybe.
It would be really interesting, because yeah. And I know that that's not the case for everyone. I know that is an option for people. But being a mom and having 3 boys, and we have a lot of rowdy energy in our house right now, right? Like we were just talking about it before the show started, because you have 2 boys around the same age, and it's just, it's all gas and no brakes, right?
It's a lot.
Yeah. But I can tell you firsthand, as someone who really focuses on blood sugar balance, that when my children sleep, and Sebastian is like 5:45, let's rock and roll, mom. And it's just been his whole life. Like we've tried and tried, and his brothers will get to 6:30 or 7, and he just, like, we have to be so diligent with him. He'll want to go till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And he's our, almost 7-year-old, who I'm like, sorry, bud, like you had an 8 p.m. bedtime last night. Like we really got to lock it in at 7, because it doesn't matter what time he goes to bed. He's like up at 6 at the very latest.
Sounds exactly like my 2 boys.
And it's like they're depleted, right? And knowing how nutrition works in our house, like if my children haven't had enough protein and like healthy fats and nutritious meals and consistency with those, like Chris and I will turn around and we're like, this is food related. Like, what'd they eat today? What's happening? What like sugar crash are they on right now? So and the sleep, the nutrition, and the exercise, I mean, they're very, very active little boys, but there is nothing that a bike ride in our cul-de-sac won't fix. It's pretty magical to get them outside. And like I said, it's all gas. So they would go from surfing Doho to hitting the bike pump track to wanting to go to the park to getting home and being like, who's going to throw the ball with me? And I'm like, wait, we just did like 3 very big, like large motor physical activities. Like, how do we still have more energy for this? But that's just my life as a mom of boys. So can we talk about those lifestyle interventions that need to happen first, what you've seen in clinical practice, what recommendations you make, and then maybe go to the like traditional supplements that people can get from, hopefully a good lab or a good manufacturing facility with
you want to make sure it's good.
Third-party testing and all that.
Absolutely, yeah. The supplements can be the Wild West. But I'll start with nutrition. There was a recent study that came out of like 200 kids. The only intervention that they did was really locking in nutrition. These are kids with ADHD. 70% experienced significant improvements. And I've had some patients where I present a plan. There might be like 10 different things on the plan. We start with nutrition, and then we don't need to get to number 3, 4, 5, 6 because they see such significant improvements. So everybody is different, and obviously people should consult with their pediatrician. But generally speaking, the things I tell people to avoid: refined sugar, for sure. You were alluding to this. Blood sugar spikes and crashes are the enemy of all brains, but especially ADHD brains. You don't want to run on a blood sugar spike because you know a crash is going to follow. You're going to be dopamine depleted. It's going to be that much harder. And the ups and downs also generate inflammation in the brain, which doesn't help anything. Mm-hmm. The way I think about inflammation is if there's a hot spot in the brain, it makes it hotter. Cold spot makes it colder, right? So it just exacerbates everything. So refined sugar, gluten in many cases, especially in the US, our household is gluten-free. There's just so many curveballs with gluten that even if someone doesn't have a pronounced sensitivity or an allergy to it, I think it's generally a good idea to cut out for most. And then processed foods, just the rule of thumb, and you've probably said this on your podcast, if you can't pronounce the ingredient, if you couldn't buy that ingredient by itself at the same store that you're shopping in, probably not good for your brain, just as a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And then I also think about food sensitivities. So a lot of people are walking around with undiagnosed food sensitivities, and it's pretty easy to get testing on that. And sometimes it's something you would have never expected, like a peach is the thing that ramps up inflammation in someone's brain. Mm-hmm. And so cutting that stuff out for a solid month and then reintroducing it to see if there's a change can often be helpful. And then for most people, there's exceptions, but for most people, I recommend like a Mediterranean style diet. So plenty of lean proteins, like you were saying, chicken, turkey, eggs, wild-caught salmon, bison, lamb, plant-based, all of the good lean proteins. Starting the day and ending the day with lean protein, critical for an ADHD brain. The worst breakfast in the world for ADHD is a bowl of sugary cereal.
Oh, yeah.
Best, couple eggs, avocado, some blueberries, something like that.
Yeah.
But, so lean proteins, healthy fats, you also said that. The brain is 60% fat after you take the water out, so fat is good. So nuts, seeds, avocado, coconut, assuming no allergies. For oils, I typically recommend avocado or olive, and usually not really anything else. Yeah. And then fruits, vegetables. I tell kids to eat the rainbow every day, but not Skittles. Right?
Yeah. Pro tip.
Pro tip, not Skittles. Some fruits are better than others. Some fruits are higher in sugar, have a higher glycemic index, like pineapple, mango, grapes. So trying to do more of the lower sugar fruits. Right. And then complex carbs, like sweet potatoes and quinoa, millet, wild rice. That helps keep your serotonin level up, which for many of those types of ADHD we talked about, serotonin is the calming neurotransmitter. So if you've got an area that's overactive, serotonin is very helpful. So generally, that's what I'm recommending for nutrition. Hopefully that jives with what you tend to recommend.
Basically what's in my pantry and fridge. Yeah. Good. No, I would say, I'm gluten-free. I would say we've had some sourdough creep from the Ecology Center down where we live, but it makes me motivated to pull it back out again. I think that's kind of like I go in ebbs and flows. I don't like some of the gluten-free alternatives that just slap the gluten-free label on it, and you're like, there's 16 ingredients in this bread. And we had a kindergartner who was like, why don't I get sandwiches? And I was like, I will find something, or I will make it. And so I tried my hand at sourdough for a little bit, and ultimately found like a really good provider. But at the same time, it's like, I've known this, and so just to be reminded and be like, go back to like chicken rice bowls that I used to put in the lunchbox and the turkey roll-ups, and take a beat for September,
It sounds good. I mean, as a parent, I know it's a lot more work to do this, right? I mean, it's a lot of effort to try to think about everything so meticulously, but at the same time, if it's optimizing the health of someone's brain and maybe it helps them perform better in school, maybe you avoid medication, it's an investment, right? It's an investment. And I think it's, in my mind, 100% worth it. But I also empathize with parents sometimes who have the 3 kids who have ADHD, and maybe they have ADHD themselves, and then suddenly there are all these new things to be thinking about. And I tell them, You don't have to build this in a day, right? Start with a swap, right? They like chicken nuggets. Let's find a brand that's easier, or not easier, but a brand that is equally easy but healthier.
Yeah.
And then just slowly roll it out. You don't have to build it in a day.
Right. So when you think about like changing someone's exercise as a child, or do you work with adults too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So any human that you're working with, like how are you making an impact on their physical activity? Because that's a hard one to change.
Yeah. So for adults, I'll tell them, for most adults again, so there's no like one recommendation fits all, but for most adults, I'll tell them to start with 20 minutes of cardio 4 days a week and start with whatever intensity they feel comfortable with. The goal is to work up to sweaty, wouldn't want to have a conversation, heart pounding cardio for those 20 minutes. Because 20 minutes 4 days a week is equivalent to what an antidepressant does in our brain. It increases serotonin to a similar extent, but instead of side effects, the side effect is fitness and
being jacked,
exactly.
Being ready for spring break in summer.
That's the side effect. So generally that's a starting point for adults, and then some strength training to maintain bone density and muscle mass and these things, longevity. For kids with ADHD, sports are often the way to go because it's going to be harder to have a kid go run on a treadmill for 20 minutes. But I have 4 sports that are my favorite for ADHD. One is swimming. Okay. Swimming does so many good things for the brain. I mean, you get the cardio, but you also get bilateral movement, which basically activates a part of the brain called the corpus callosum. It's right in the middle, and it helps integrate a lot of sensory information, which is great for ADHD. Swimming, fantastic. Soccer is also great, as long as people aren't doing headers.
Okay.
Consecutive headers can actually show up on a brain scan. So soccer with no headers.
Okay.
Martial arts, if you've got a good sensei, like a discipline, coordination, there's definitely plenty of cardio there. And then tennis. I absolutely love tennis for ADHD for a few reasons. One, you've got the cardio piece for sure. But 2, hit any racket sport requires a lot of coordination. And when we're engaging in things that increase coordination, we're activating a part of the brain in the back called the cerebellum. Mm-hmm. And the cerebellum is actually hardwired to the prefrontal cortex. So not only are you getting the cardio, you're also indirectly boosting the prefrontal cortex specifically with something like tennis.
Training focus.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, I definitely need a brain scan because I was the right wing on a soccer team and I definitely did not avoid headers. So
we have at least 2 reasons for you to have a brain scan.
Okay, officially. So sleep. I mean, I touched on Sebastian being an early bird. My Oura Ring thinks I'm an early bird. It's to be debated. But what recommendations do you have around sleep for children? Is there like a recommended time? Should they be going to bed early or later? Like, how does it work? So many families are so different.
Yeah. For kids, it's a little tricky because they all have slightly different biological clocks. And some kids are early risers, like it sounds like Sebastian and my boys. And some will sleep in if you let them. I think it depends on the stage or the age that they are. Younger ages are obviously going to require more sleep. Teenage years, the biological clock shifts, and teenagers actually are wired to stay up late and sleep in late. Unfortunately, schools aren't wired the same way because they're run by adults, who have a different wiring. So as a rule of thumb, the things I recommend to all ages, including adults, you definitely want to shut down the screens an hour before bed. Our brain does not know how to differentiate light from a screen versus light from the sun. And we've all, well, maybe not all, but many of us have fallen asleep to a screen before. And you can do that pretty well, right? You can scroll through social media and nod off or watch a show. The issue is you don't get into deep sleep the same way. And so sleep is critical to brain health. It's not your brain doesn't turn off when you're sleeping. It's actively cleaning itself and consolidating memories and forging new pathways. So you want to get into deep sleep. So screens, one issue. Another is people spend a lot of time in their bed when they're not sleeping. And there's this concept called sleep efficiency, which is basically the number of hours that you're sleeping in bed divided by the number of hours in bed. And that ratio, if it's anything less than 90%, our sleep quality is poor. So the way to improve it is spend less time in bed unless you're sleeping, right? So only be in bed when you're sleeping. And so that's a big one for like teenagers in particular who often do their homework in bed or talk on the phone in bed or things like that. So that's a big one.
That makes sense.
And then for adults, I tell them wake up the same time every day. You know, even if it's a weekend, a holiday, just do your best to, with some flexibility, wake up at around the same time each day, get sun on your face. It turns out that when you wake up is more important for setting your circadian rhythm than when you go to sleep. So waking up at the same time each day and getting sun on your face will predict that your next night of sleep is going to be better.
That's great. Especially because I have toddlers and children that wake me up at the exact same time every day.
You have no choice.
Yeah.
You're winning sleep.
So if you would like to sync your circadian rhythm, eat well, and be active, just have boys.
Exactly. Right.
Because apparently, that's always like the funny part when you start cooking for your children. Because you're like, I have broiled chicken, sweet potatoes with nothing on them, broccoli that's been steamed with olive oil. Like, it's so simple, the way that you cook for your children and the way that you eat when your kids are so little.
Yes.
It's like, it's actually kind of amazing if you're cooking for them, because you cook so plain and bland and just whole foods and on their own, and you just put it together in bowls. And I end up eating sometimes on separated plates because I'm like, I just pull all four out and I'm like, well, I guess I'm eating on a plate that separates my protein from my veggies and starch. And it just like
those
the way it goes.
little metal plates?
Yeah, I have the stainless steel metal plates.
Yeah, like the bluish ones?
Yeah, they're great.
Same ones in our house.
They're so good. Especially because, they're big enough for the boys, but they, there's no endocrine disrupting stuff and all that plastic.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got nutrition, we've got exercise, we've got sleep. When it comes to supplementation, is there anything specifically helpful for children of all ages, but then specifically for ADHD?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. For most people, it's hard to get the right amount of omega-3s from diet alone. And there's plenty of research to show that if you take someone with ADHD and you give them an omega-3 like fish oil or an algae-based omega-3 compared to a placebo, the people who get the omega-3 do better. And omega-3s are good for so many other things too: skin health, joint health, heart health. So it's hard to get that just from diet alone. And if you are trying to get it from diet alone, you start worrying about things like mercury. And so, so omega-3s typically would be one thing I would think about. Dosing depends on age. A brain-directed multivitamin, you know, so even if ideally you're getting all your nutrients from food, and that can also be difficult. So having a multivitamin on board, from a good, trusted brand that's third-party tested. And oftentimes vitamin D, it's worth checking. Low vitamin D is associated with difficulty with concentrating, brain fog, low energy, low mood. And a lot of people are running with really, really low vitamin Ds. So those are just basic starting points. Then I'll often use labs to inform where a specific nutrient deficiency is. And so you think about that. And then in terms of things that are helpful for ADHD, again, this is not for everybody, but these are things I'm thinking about. Pycnogenol, which is a pine bark extract that actually reduces inflammation in the brain and has been shown in studies to help with ADHD. I think about things like ashwagandha, ginseng, rhodiola, decaf green tea extracts. For some people, paraxanthine, which is not necessarily for younger kids, but it's a metabolite of caffeine. So caffeine in and of itself, not great for brain health. Too much caffeine.
Wait, what?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
We're gonna circle back to that in a hot second. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I can go on a tangent like no one else. But too much caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain. And so while it gives you the initial up, again, inevitably there's the crash or the jitters or the insomnia that goes with it. Paraxanthine is a metabolite of caffeine, and it gives you just kind of like a smoother, cleaner experience without the crash, without the jitters, doesn't tend to cause insomnia. So again, maybe like for an older kid, teenager, certainly adults, I use paraxanthine, not infrequently. So.
Awesome. I mean, I think I've said it a million times on this podcast, but caffeine is my favorite drug. Is it a drug? I don't know. A substance? I definitely tend to be on the side of abusing it versus not abusing it. And it's like, I'm like, don't take my only thing. I don't even drink or do anything else anymore. Like, I don't know. I just like
there are worse vices. There are worse vices. I look forward
to it in the morning, and like I'm like, all right, first cup, we're good. Yeah. Second cup, okay, what time is it? And I've like got it to the point where I'm like, I'm not really doing as much in the afternoon. Like sometimes never, but sometimes I'm like, yes, it's 1:30, it's fine. It's before 2. I don't know. It's bad.
How do you feel after a cup of coffee?
Great.
Energized, calm, focused?
Focused.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's mostly like excited and focused.
Mm-hmm. Could you have a cup of coffee before going to bed, or would it keep you up?
It's definitely kept me up before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just figuring out your ADD type.
Okay. He doesn't need the scan after all.
Yeah, you're probably, well, anyway, we'll see.
I'm also slightly impulsive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
As many with ADHD are.
Yeah.
You know, again, it goes back to that dopamine deficiency hypothesis. Like, if your brain is running lower on dopamine, it's going to weigh the immediate dopamine hit more than playing out the tape, you know? And so... Yeah. That a lot of parents of kids with ADHD, a lot of parents with kids who have ADHD want to know, like, either why is my kid conflict seeking, or why does my kid lie? Mm-hmm. Conflict seeking, because when you're in conflict, your brain is generating more dopamine. And it's not that you're sadistic and you want to fight. It's that the ADHD brain has a harder time extracting itself from that, because it gets into that hyper-focus mode, right? And then for lying, you know, kids with ADHD who might lie, it's because they weigh the immediate reward over the long-term consequence. They have a hard time playing out the tape. And then when they're confronted with it, there's all the shame and, you know, self-esteem stuff that goes with ADHD, and the desire to get out of it because I don't want to get in trouble again.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, the lie appears.
Fascinating. Holy cow. So do you think because I like caffeine that I'm like that, I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm like, I want that immediate feeling right now versus like, I'm going to be depleted later?
I think if I had to guess, your ADD type, and maybe we'll do another episode where we look at your scan.
Hey, we'll bring the team in. We'll tape the SPECT scan. We'll get the results. I'll share. I don't care. My guess is you probably have a combo of that like inattentive and anxious type ADD. That would be my guess. But I could be wrong. Yeah. Interestingly, I have more of like the sort of like combined to like inattentive, impulsive, hyperactive. If I drink a cup of coffee before bed, I'll sleep like a rock. And that's often a clue for some people with that more classic type of ADHD. It's not necessarily that you feel jacked on it. You can feel more focused and alert, but you also feel calmer at the same time, and you could easily go to sleep. So if anyone has that experience, you might have ADHD. Wow. That's crazy. Now I'm going to need to really understand all of the types and have questions ready for all my friends who have told me that they have ADD or ADHD. Because you're like, I'm sure that's what you want to know for every person that comes to your office that's been diagnosed. Like, which type are you? Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where a lot of the magic happens, because when you figure out the type, then you tailor the treatment. Right. So the whole goal of this episode is for people to understand functional brain scans, understand the different types of ADHD, and then also have some tools to improve their scans. So with inflammation, the hot spots get hotter, the cold spots get colder. Mm-hmm. What is the goal of like getting that second scan 6 months later? What what are you looking to see change, and what, like, does it always happen? Does it happen fast? Like,
I'm looking for the cold spots to get hotter and the hot spots to get colder,
Okay.
essentially. Yeah. And does it always happen? No.
Yeah.
We track outcome measures, and at the 1 year mark, the percent of patients who follow through with a plan that experience significant improvement is at about 85%, which, when you think about the population we serve, that says something, because the average person has seen 4 psychiatrists already. They've been on 3 to 5 different medications already. So a lot of times the people we're seeing, this isn't the first encounter with mental health. But in terms of how often do you see something improve on the scan, probably about that rate. And if it's not changing, then it makes me rethink the plan,
Right.
and helps us refocus and move in another direction.
It's interesting that you are, I don't know any other clinics that are doing SPECT scans.
There are, we recently had a group from the Philippines come over, and they're trying to build something similar in the Philippines. There are a few other clinics, internationally that use this type of technology, but not to the same scale yet. I think that's going to change. I truly do feel like there will be this revolution in mental health where we're thinking about it more as brain health. And I think that time hasn't come quite yet, but I do think it's going to come.
When you look at, like, I've had Chris Palmer on the podcast before, and talk about, like, mental health being metabolic health. Like, how do you feel about that theory or thesis?
I think both things can be true, right? Like, I have had patients on ketogenic diets, like Chris Palmer talks about in his book, and you can see radical improvements. I'm talking about people with psychotic illness that have not responded to antipsychotic medications, and they go on a ketogenic diet. And again, it's not everybody, it's not one size fits all, but oftentimes you'll see significant improvements, not just in losing all the weight that they gained from the antipsychotics that they were on, but also in underlying psychotic symptoms. And it makes sense. The temporal lobes on the sides, those are involved in our perception of the world around us. So when those get altered in activity, we can experience things like hallucinations and delusions. Ketogenic diets calm the temporal lobes, which is why they're used in seizures, right? Most seizures originate in the temporal lobes. So it makes sense. And I think, mental health is brain health is metabolic health, it's emotional health, it's spiritual health, it's biological. All of these things are true.
You touched on something, spiritual health. Like, when you're working with clients or patients, we can call them, meditation, a religious practice, or a relationship with God or Mother Nature, having those flow states, like, how are you using that as an adjunct to them not feeling like they're, like, losing it and in control of everything?
We all need to be able to connect with something that's bigger than us, and whether that's religion, spirituality, meditation, being part of a community, it just has to be something bigger than us, because that is grounding. And I encourage people to find what that thing is. And again, it does not have to be the same thing for everyone.
Right. When you look at the other diagnoses, obviously, you went from 3 types of ADHD to 7 at the Amen Clinic. Has that happened in other types of disease states, like depression?
Yes. So another great point. You can look at 2 scans of people with depression, and they can be radically different, right? The symptoms are the same, but in one person, they have a really active thalamus, that classic mood center that's overactive. And in another person, their thalamus can look fine. And if you look at the surface of their brain, it looks like Swiss cheese. Not literally, right? But the blood flow pattern looks like Swiss cheese.
I'm like, geez, that sounds like trouble.
And in that person, you'd be thinking much more about a toxic component, an infectious component, an underlying inflammatory component, something else that's contributing to depression. So I've seen people come in who are diagnosed as depressed, and then you find out they have heavy metal toxicity, and you clear that and they get better. I've seen people who get misdiagnosed with dementia, and you find out that they've had untreated sleep apnea for many years. And sleep apnea steals blood flow from the same exact parts of the brain as dementia, as Alzheimer's dementia. So misdiagnosis is a big thing in this field. I mean, even going back to ADHD, the amount of times that I have seen someone get misdiagnosed as being bipolar, when in fact they have significant ADHD symptoms. I don't know how many times it's been. It's been a lot of times. So I see misdiagnosis all the time.
Well, you just mentioned that bipolar can be diagnosed, or an ADHD person can be diagnosed with bipolar. What are some of those misdiagnoses that happen all the time?
Females who are high functioning on the autism spectrum get misdiagnosed with all kinds of things: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. I've even seen schizophrenia as a diagnosis. I see that commonly. I see ADHD getting misdiagnosed as bipolar, as I mentioned. I've seen autism get misdiagnosed as schizophrenia also in boys. I have seen trauma show up, or trauma be the underlying reason for why someone has substantial mood swings or perceptual disturbances. There's a lot of examples.
Yeah. Trauma and microtrauma is like a really buzzy, I feel like not buzzy, but it's just like talked about a lot more in this space. And processing trauma, I think of all of like the psychedelics that are becoming popular, and going back into research. And I mean, I saw one on psilocybin and OCD at Johns Hopkins. Like it seems like people are talking a lot about processing trauma, and that feels obviously like a quick fix. But how much does what we go through in a day, like our trauma and our experiences, impact diagnoses?
So much. So a lot of people will ask me, at the start of the call, do I feel the way I feel because of my biology, or is it my environment? Is it my psychology? And really what I've landed on is it's all the same thing, because what we go through environmentally literally shapes how blood flows through our brain. And we have scans to prove that. There's, in this database of almost 300,000 scans, there's a pattern that you see much more commonly in people who have been through past emotional trauma. It's called a diamond pattern. And basically in that pattern, 3 different regions are lighting up at the same time. The anterior cingulate up top, 2 basal ganglia, and then the thalamus. And if you kind of trace them, it sort of looks like a diamond, hence the name. And that pattern correlates very strongly with past emotional trauma. It's not 100%, but it's a strong correlation. That is an example of environment changing biology. It's not scar tissue, right? It's not like stuck like that, but oftentimes that's how it's firing in the moment for the person.
Yeah.
But then each of those regions, we've sort of talked about at different points on this episode, they influence our symptoms and our psychology and the way we interact with our world. But then that feeds back on us and our brain and our biological health. So it all is, in my mind, the same thing. So trauma definitely does influence brain structure.
So I've heard the term, what fires together, wires together.
Mm-hmm.
And we know a lot about neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to change. When you have that diamond pattern, or someone has past emotional or physical trauma and that's showing up, what can they do, or what have you seen? Have you seen it been like, can people change their brain?
Yes, absolutely. You are not stuck with the brain you have, including diamond patterns. There are a number of things you think about. One, just on the biological side, you think about anything that increases serotonin, which doesn't have to mean an SSRI like Prozac. It could be supplementation. It could be high intensity cardio. It can be nutrition. It could be connection. just things that increase serotonin calms the diamond and gives you more flexibility to be able to work with it. And then one of the most powerful forms of therapy for past emotional trauma is EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And the idea with that mode of therapy is trauma is locked in the brain at the developmental level at which it occurred. So all the things we were thinking, all the things we were feeling, the way we viewed the world at the time that the thing happened, that's all locked in at the same time with the memory. So when the memory comes back, it all comes flooding back. So if whatever happened was when we were 7 and we're now 40, we still feel like a 7-year-old when it comes up. And so the idea with EMDR is the therapist, you build a relationship, you develop some coping strategies, et cetera, and the therapist guides you through actually thinking about the specific trauma and letting yourself feel the things you feel. And you have to do that carefully. And at the same time, it sounds like magic, but they guide you through a series of either eye movement or tapping exercises. And what it allows you to do is give your brain an entry point to integrate what you now know with what happened then. So that when the memory comes back up, it's not that you've forgotten it, right? It's not, Men in Black, delete the file. You still remember what happened, but it doesn't have the same emotional grip over you. And I've seen so many people benefit from therapies like EMDR.
Yeah, you just explained it so well. I've had people talk about it. I've had clients use it. I haven't personally used EMDR. Sounds interesting. I'd be down. But it's done a lot of wonderful things for clients, and I'd never heard it explained like that. So thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So when it comes to the future, obviously you have thousands of brain scans. What do you hope will be the future of psychiatry and the use of functional brain scans moving forward?
I hope that not just psychiatry, but as a society, we reframe mental health as brain health. We take away the stigma, because mental health conditions are treated unlike any other health condition. If someone is depressed, it's somehow their fault. If someone's ADHD, they're not trying hard enough. We wouldn't say that to people with other health conditions. So really emphasizing that mental health is brain health, and then psychiatry as an institution reacting accordingly, looking at the brain.
Yeah.
That's what I would hope.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what you guys have been able to do at Amen Clinics. I'm so glad that there's been so much press and light around it, even through social media, celebrities, athletes. I know you've scanned a number of like NFL players with brain trauma, and it gives me a lot of hope that the future is that we are looking at the brain. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being here. Be home with your family and your boys, and I really appreciate you giving me the time, because I've been so interested in all of the ADHD knowledge that you share online. I want people to follow along. I want them to learn from you. Where can they do that?
I'm on Instagram. They can follow at Dr. Steven Storage. Same handle on TikTok. You can also find me online on the Amen Clinics website and book an appointment if you need one.
Well, it sounds like I need one. Brain scan coming right up.
Well, we need the part 2 of the episode. So
yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Be Well by Kelly LeVeque podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review in your favorite podcast app and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We're also excited to share that full-length video episodes are now on YouTube and Spotify, so you can watch along as you listen. The best way to support me and the show is by sharing it with your friends and family. Your recommendations make all the difference. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. The video is recorded by Luke Rodriguez and edited by Jesse Trout. Sound mixing is by Mike Fry. See you next time.
The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or healthcare team first. Shout out to the Newport Beach Pendry for hosting us. I'm so grateful to record in such a beautiful space that truly elevates the podcast experience for myself and my guests. From the stunning design to their incredible hospitality, it's a perfect setting for meaningful conversations and creative energy. Hey, thanks, Pendry.